Physicist Farmgal number 16, also known as the birthday edition. So y'all come and hang out. Okay, we have dispensed with the silly hats. But I made those hats because one of the best birthdays I ever remembered was when I was about 4. My mom had a party for me and she made a whole bunch of hats out of wrapping paper. So I got in my Christmas wrapping paper and made Willie, my dear little co-host, and me hats. My name is Debra, and this is a podcast about my crafting. And I like to do all the crafts. I knit, I crochet, I sew, I quilt, I bake baskets, I make jewelry, pretty much anything I can get my hands on. I am also a professor of physics and astronomy at a local university where I teach a variety of classes. Everything from online general education classes to physics majors, senior level classes in astrophysics and meteorology. I also volunteer to do planetarium shows for school groups, and I also am an advocate for young women in STEM. And last but certainly not least, I am a third generation family farmer. I own my family farm here in the foothills of the Arkansas Ozarks, where I raise grass-fed beef cattle. I also have Appaloosa and paint horses, and I am a haven for some rescued donkeys, miniature horses, and a miniature mule named Pumpkin who thinks she rules the roost. And as you can see from my co-host Willie here, hi Willie, you tell everybody hi? No? Okay. I am fur kid mom to 14 dogs, 5 indoor cats, and an undetermined number of outside cats. In addition, I raise show quality poultry and rabbits, and eventually want to start a heritage nonprofit here at my farm, teaching about heritage skills and homesteading skills. And today is my birthday. I am 49 years old today, and I'm not a bit ashamed to tell you how many times I have orbited the sun, because I think there's a wisdom that comes with age that I'm really appreciating as I've gotten older. So I hope you're going to hang out and visit with us today. If you're a new viewer, welcome to the Funny Farm. And if you're a returning viewer, I'm so tickled that you're here, and I'm glad you're here to help me celebrate my birthday. And we're going to get started here with episode number 16 of Diary of the Physicist Farmgal. Yay! Okay, if you're looking for us on social media, my farm Facebook page is the same as my YouTube channel name is Buckthorn Farms. You can also find me as Doc Firewoman on Ravelry and on Instagram. I also have a Twitter account, but Twitter is where I tend to share my political points of view, and I am a pretty outspoken left-leaning liberal. So if that bothers you, you might not want to follow me on Twitter, but I kind of keep that to a minimum on my other stuff, although I do speak up from time to time when I think something's really important. Also, we have a Ravelry group for the podcast, Diary of a Physicist Farmgal, where you can go and find out about make-alongs, and which we'll talk about in just a second, and also ask questions or just general chit-chat. And also, we are getting close to 100 subscribers on YouTube, so I think I'm going to have a little giveaway. Don't know what yet, but I'll figure something out when I get to my 100th subscriber on YouTube. So we're getting close, and I'll let y'all know when I get ready to open that giveaway thread on the Ravelry page. So, speaking of make-alongs, today is the last day for our charity make-along. Our charity make-along was where we have been aiming to make items for charity, and I would pretty much take any craft. You could knit, you could crochet, you could sew, you could quilt. I don't care. It doesn't matter, so as long as you're donating to a charity, that's all that matters. And I was very fortunate last Friday to get to go with my friend Carol when she took her crocheted lap blankets over to the River Valley Hospice home. The lady was very, very grateful to get them and was very touched that she had brought them. And I'm going to be making a delivery later this week myself. But today is the last day, so make sure you get your items in today, and I'll be drawing for prizes probably later this week, and we'll announce those winners on the next podcast. So, yeah, and we had some good participation. I was really tickled to see how many people joined in. So now we're going to move on and start talking about finished objects. Okay, so my two finished objects this week are directly related to the charity make-along. I finished my lap quilts, which I posted pictures of these on Instagram, but I will show them to you now. I'm going to have to stand up to do it, so let me stand up. I made 2 lap quilts for the River Valley Hospice home. Here's the first one. Okay. And then here is the second one. It's a little bit bigger. It's got a different shape to it, so I'm going to hold it this way. Oops. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I finished both of those. The binding is done. I had them all done but the binding last week, but now I've got the binding sewed down, and I'm going to be taking those. Our hospice home takes lap quilt donations because every time a patient is admitted to hospice care, they provide these quilts as sort of a comfort to the patient, and then when the patient ultimately passes on, they allow the families to keep the quilts as sort of a memento. So different community groups or individuals will donate quilts. I still have the one that they gave my father when he was a resident there at the end of his life. So I think it's for a really good cause. So those are my 2 finished objects this week. I don't have any yarny finished objects, but I did get quite a ways on a couple of things, so I will share those in works in progress. Okay, I have a couple of yarny works in progress and then a couple of sewing works in progress that I'll share with you this week. My first work in progress is in my April 9 Designs alpaca bag, and she makes really great quality bags. I highly encourage you to check out her Etsy shop. You always get some kind of a little progress keeper with your bags, and a lot of her bags, I don't think all of them, but a lot of them have this sewn in measuring tape in them, which I really like. They're really, to me, good quality bags and great value for money. But this is my Kraken Shawl, and I am actually getting pretty close to being done with this. It works, if you remember, it works from the wide side down, so I am speeding through. I finished my first 2 skeins of yarn. I'm holding fingering weight double, and then I have started my second wave of yarn. Okay, so it's hard to see. I'm gonna have to be able to show you the Kraken. You can kind of sort of make him out there, but I think I need to hold it up in front of the window or something for you guys to see. But anyway, you can kind of make out his tentacles there. I think when I block it, it'll help it quite a bit though. But as you can see, it's winding down. I'm on the bottom half of the Kraken body now and doing the bottom tentacles, and I'll be done. And I'm going to do the tassels and everything. So I am using, this is a pattern by Alex from Two Hearts Crochet. So it's the Kraken Shawl, and this is just the graph. I'll show it very quickly because I don't have the pattern handy, but that's what he looks like. Okay, it's filet crochet, so if you can double crochet and you can chain, you can make this. And I am using Suutra Fiber Arts. They're a vase base, which is her MCN base, and this colorway combo is called Northern Lights. And I am holding, this is a DK shawl, but I'm holding fingering weight double, which may also be why the definition is not as good as it needs to be. But I think once I block it, there you can kind of see them, okay? I think once I block it, you'll be able to make it out a lot better. So I'm quite a ways. I think I'm on row 37 or 38 out of 60, but they are getting progressively shorter as I go. So I think I'm going to have no problem finishing this within the next week or so. Yay! So I'm tickled about that, and she's got some beautiful tassels that I'm going to make sure and include on there because I think they really set it off. My other thing that I'm going to show, and you're going to be very surprised by this, it's in my April 9 Designs Playful Otters bag. I have, for some reason, jumped up and started working back on my Helen Stewart Impressionist shawl again. So there's that. It was all over Instagram. If you are on Instagram, I'm sure you saw multiple versions of this. And for some reason, I got the bug to work on this, so I am actually about 70% of the way done. Now, this is a very long shawl, so it's kind of hard to tell a whole lot about it since it's scrunched up so much on the needles, but you can see where I'm at. I'm finishing clue 3. I've got about, I think, 5 more rows to go on clue 3 that are mostly garter stitch. It's got this eyelet detail. I've got one more row of this eyelet detail, and then the rest of it's garter stitch. And then the last part of the shawl is all this dark color. And it's really starting to grow on me now. I wasn't quite so sure when I was down in here about these colors, but I'm really happy now with the colors that Stephanie helped me pick out for this. The light color and the green are Primrose Yarn Company, and then the dark color is Kimarie Knacks. The light color is called Heads Will Roll. The green is called Maple Leaf. And the dark color, which is hard to tell very much about, but it'll be easier to see more about it as we get to the last part. It's got a lot of different colors in it. That is Area 51. That's a Kimarie Knacks. So I'm actually pretty proud of myself. I've got some a conference coming up, and I think this is actually some knitting that I can do at the conference, because a lot of it is just garter stitch. Now, I've never done a picot bind off, and I read the directions for the picot bind off, but I'm a more visual person, so I'm going to have to look at some videos or something, because I'm not quite clicking just yet. But I did see shawls with the picot bind off and without, and I really prefer the look of the picot bind off, so I'm going to do that. So anyway, here is my that's my Impressionist mystery knit along. So I'm pretty proud of myself, and I even put a couple of rows on my Raina shawl, but not enough that you can really tell much of a difference, so I'm not going to show that this week. Okay, so that's my two yarny works in progress. Now, what else have I got going on? Well, as I showed in Future Crafting last week, I have cut out the little apron panel. It's just folded in half right now, and I've cut out the backing. So I'm going to work on getting that sewed up. What I decided to do was line it, okay? Now, a lot of these panels just call to turn under a hem, like you were hemming a dress or something, and I don't like how that looks. I think that looks unfinished. So I'm actually going to line this, and I'm going to line all of my straps with this sort of basket weave, this yellow basket weave material here, okay? So this is just a little Autumn Harvest panel. It's kind of folded up right now, but you can get the gist of it. So I have got that cut out. Got to get that sewed up. So I've got that. Now, another thing that I have drug out of the pile of doom is, if you remember, I made a pillow that I had showed you. I just made it into a little tiny quilt, and I said, oh, it looked like crud, so I took it apart and made it into a pillow. Well, this is the quilt that came from. This is the original quilt. This is just a wall quilt or a lap quilt, whatever you want to call it. And this is a pattern called Strips That Sizzle, and the way you put it together is kind of along the lines of a log cabin piecing, but not quite, because the strips are different sizes. But you can set them together in different ways. I've set them together to get these sort of diamond shape or rhombus shaped repeats, okay? So I want to get that, put on some batting and backing and get that quilted. A friend of mine was telling me about a lady who machine quilts not too far from here, and she's fairly reasonable, but this is one I think I could machine quilt myself without too much trouble, because I would just do sort of a grid pattern, I think, on it, just that way to let the fabrics and the blocks speak for themselves. So that I made in a class when I still lived in Oklahoma. I've mentioned this multiple times, when the quilt store was, I think the quilt store was still in its old location when I started this one, but I don't remember. So early 2000s is when I started this. So if I finish this, this will be eligible for Vanessa at A Historian's Knits Finish It Make Along. I put the two lap quilts in there because those were actually started in 2013 as part of a class project that never got off the ground, and so I finished those. So I'm going to put this in there also if I get it finished. The Kraken Shawl, because it doesn't, I think it has under 30 projects still, that qualifies for Amber the Yarn Hoarder's Unsung Heroes CAL, and also Julia at the Happy Knitting Podcast, her summer stash down, because I'm using yarn from stash for that. So yeah, try to hit a few make-alongs. Now, I totally bombed on the socks last month, y'all. I did not even try to make any. I don't know. I just kind of went, I don't know why. But another thing that will qualify for the Finish It make-along, and thank goodness she's taking sewing, because mine are all sewing so far. This is a wall quilt that I started for myself. Again, early 2000s. I made my mom one of these. I borrowed this quilt pattern from my friend Jackie, and I made my mom one, and then I thought it was really pretty. Hers was really pretty, so I started making myself one, and I put it in a shoebox, because, you know, that's how I store everything. I put it in a shoebox, and it has sat untouched for at least probably 15 years, probably more than that. But I know I started in the early 2000s, okay? My friend Antonia was commenting that, was asking if or saying looked like that would take a lot of time. The trick to this particular quilt is there's some speed piecing techniques. Now, the downside of speed piecing is it's a little bit wasteful on your fabric. But what I mean by speed piecing, I've got the top put together, but this is the same way these half square triangles that were made for the points on the maple leaves. That's the same way you make the half square triangles. It has a half square triangle border all the way around it. This is what I mean by speed piecing. You take your focus fabric and then your background fabric, and you put them right sides together, and then you draw squares. Okay, so you just take a ruler with a pencil and you draw squares, and then you bisect those squares with a diagonal, and then what you do is you sew so that you sew a 1/4 inch off of this line. So if you can see there, maybe, I don't know if you can see it better on this side. Yeah, of course the lines are not on that side, but anyway, so you sew a 1/4 inch on either side of that drawn line, okay, that diagonal line. Then what you do is you cut everything out, all the squares, and then the last thing you do when you've sewn on both sides of this diagonal line, you cut the diagonal line, press it open, and you've got just about as close to perfect half square triangles as you can get. And then there's also a method, and I can't remember what it was. I've got the pattern that I could look it up. There was also a similar method for making the stem portion, okay? And then your squares are, actually this is a rectangle, and then this is a square. So you do a rectangle and then you sew a square on it. All right, so the way this block is constructed is you start with this rectangle, you sew these two squares together, attach them to your rectangle. You sew 2 half square triangles together, attach them to your rectangle. Then you come over here and you sew this block, and this block together, and you attach them all. Is that right? Yeah, something along those lines, yeah. And you put them together, and you get pretty good, true points. I mean, my points are not perfect. Okay, let me find some where you can see. My points are not perfect, but they're pretty good. I'll take them, okay? I'll take them. All right. So you're not fussy cutting all those little triangles. If you remember the little snowman I showed you, those were all fussy cut, and you see how disastrously bad that went. So I like some speed piecing techniques. It is a little bit wasteful of your fabric. If you'll see, you know, the way it's put on there, it's a little bit wasteful because you've got some waste on either side. But you know, you can use that for some other projects, or scraps if you're like me and you do scrappy things. So yeah, so those are my works in progress for this week. So now let's move on and talk a little bit about future crafting. Okay, so in future crafting, I've got a couple of things. I've talked about this several times, but Julia from the Happy Knitting Podcast released her first sock pattern. It's called the Couch and Cracker Socks, and she released that in June. She just had a knit along that ended for those, but I never got off the ground with it, so oh well. But I am going to try to cast them on. I want to try to cast them on in time to take to this conference that I've got to go to. The bummer thing about it is I have to do the driving there and back, so I don't get any knitting time on the road. It's all me driving. So, but I will have some knitting time at the conference, which will be nice. I'm going to knit them in this yarn here. This is just a yarn from Crafty. This is their Cloudborne fingering, and it is just wool. It's not merino. It's just a wool nylon blend, and it is in a colorway called Josh's Cat, and it's hard to tell. It's kind of blowing out, but that what looks more green is really more turquoise there. So I'm going to make them out of that. I think I'm going to try to knit them on a size smaller. I'm finding that knitting mine on a 1.5, which I think is a 2.75 millimeter needle. I need to look that up. They're a little too big, so I'm going to try moving down to a size 1 and see if that helps anything on the sizing of my socks. Now, another future crafting project that I've got going is I have cut out a big quilt, okay? And this is a quilt that I bought the kit for it when I still lived in Oklahoma. And I thought I had the, let me reach over here and get the diagram for it really quick. Willie, you gonna go with me? All right, let's go. Okay. Sorry, I thought I had it over here, but apparently I forgot to sit it over here. It is a log cabin style quilt. It is just a lap quilt, but it is a log cabin style, all right, which means it's made out of strips, all right, and the fabrics that I'm using, there is an overall light color that you use for all the light strips, and then there was a kit that I purchased from the quilt shop right before I moved back home, and it had all the fabrics in it. They had an overall light fabric, and then it had a selection of sort of what I would call homespun style fabrics for the darks. And I purchased this kit in July of 2005. So it has been sitting in my box waiting, and today, this afternoon, I finally cut it out. So these are my dark fabrics for the dark half of the log cabins. Okay, so it's just going to be a lap quilt. I think it's got 48 total blocks, and then you can set them together the way they, if you've never seen a log cabin style block, that's what it looks like. Okay, so these fabrics that I showed you will be all of these, and then there's a lighter all over. Oh, we've got a thunderstorm starting apparently. Lighter all over fabric for this part. And hang on just a second because I've got dogs. Okay, sorry about that. I had some dogs out back, and I know that 2 of them are afraid of thunder, so I had to go let them in before the storm got here. We have some little pop-up thunderstorms coming, and I'm very grateful for that because we really need the rain. But anyway, so there's what the log cabin block looks like, and I went ahead since I got up to go let the dogs in, and I got the lighter color too. So this is the lighter fabric that I'll be using for the light half of all my blocks. So there's 48 blocks total, and then you set it together in such a way that the blocks, there's different ways you can do log cabins to get different effects, but I like it when you set it together to make sort of these big overall sort of diamonds or on-point squares or whatever you want to call them. So that's the method I'm going to use when I set it together. So yeah, so got that cut out, and I'm probably going to start on that tonight. We'll see how far I get on it, but got all that cut out. Now, I got distracted. I was looking for something, and I opened up, I'm bad to take like little plastic bottle containers or little, well, there's one right here if I can reach it. These little, we used to get these Gatorade in these little containers, and we would use them when we would go to the hayfield, and we would put, you know, I would save them, and we would use them for storage because they're a nice little size to store things, buttons and whatnot in. Well, I don't throw things away very easily. I try to make use out of all my scrap pieces. And one thing that I had done is I had a bunch of scraps left over from some Christmas crafting that I was doing. So what I did was I took some cookie cutters and I cut out some shapes using Wonder Under, which is that fusible webbing. And I had cut out some shapes and I had them stuffed in one of those containers, and I found them while I was looking for something else. So what I did was I decided I'd take the scraps pieces from where I was cutting out that backing for that apron and go ahead and fuse them down to it. And then what I did was I'm going to make either like little stuffed ornaments out of these, or maybe a little gift tag tie-on type things. Well, while I was digging around looking for something else, I found some that my mother had started, and she just fused these onto some felt, and these already have like the to and from stuff. They are little gift tag tie-ons. I think these would be really cute on a Christmas tree, or of course you could tie them to gifts. I'm kind of picky when it comes to doing things like that for people. There are a handful of people that I will really go to a lot of trouble when I wrap their gift and do these little extra things for. Is that terrible? You know, we've a lot of people have had the conversation about who is knit worthy and who is craft worthy or quilt worthy or sewing worthy. The people that I do that for, I know would really appreciate them. So they don't go just anywhere. That sounds terrible, doesn't it? But anyway, so yeah, so I'm gonna work these up. What I will probably do with these is satin stitch around them on my sewing machine, or I might even just use fabric paint. And then I fixed a back for each one where I can sew it up and turn it right side out, and then just stuff it and put some ribbon or something on it. But I just thought they were really cute. I ran onto them and I thought, I had them laying out for some reason on my sewing table, and I saw the backing, these pieces of backing fabric, and I went, that would be a good backing fabric for those things. So, got those on tap here too. So, yeah, I think that is all. Oh, I'm going to show one more thing. Now, this is not really future crafting. It's sort of past and future crafting, like past and future king, like King Arthur. Many years ago, I went to Scotland, and, you know, of course, when you go to Scotland, you want to buy a fisherman sweater, and I did. I have a couple that I bought, because I went to Scotland several times, because the man that I was with for several years was from Scotland. And so one time I went, didn't know, I wasn't a very good knitter yet, but I decided I was going to knit myself a sweater. So we went to the little yarn store. I don't think it was in his hometown. I think it was the next town over. His sister and I, who get along, we're still good friends, thanks to Facebook, we're still good friends, went there, and I picked up this pattern. Now, this was way above my pay grade at that time. I was about, that's close to 20 years ago. So I've had this sitting for 20 years, or not, maybe not quite that long, maybe more like 16 or 17 years. But I started it over Christmas. And of course, not knowing about yarn, I just bought the gigantic ball of yarn, or 2 balls of yarn. The lady helped me pick it out. Now, one thing that I've noticed, because this has been in storage for so long, it's breaking. And I don't know if that's where the door was opening and shutting on it. I'm hoping as I get down in there deeper, I don't have this problem. But I will show you how far I am on it. Not very is the answer to that. I've done the ribbing, and I'm that far. So I kind of got in the mood to pick this back up. It's knit in pieces. This is the back, I think, actually. This is the back. You've got this panel of this sort of diamond shape at the bottom, and then the cable detail going up the front. But this is how far I've gotten, and I'd kind of like to finish it, and that's my cable needle stuck in there. So I kind of am getting in the mood to pick this back up, which I have set this down. I haven't really worked on this since Christmas vacation. But anyway, so I kind of like to finish that, because that was I sort of told myself, like I said, I don't make New Year's resolutions, but I sort of set crafting goals. And my crafting goals for this year was to learn to knit socks, which I have done, although I'm still a baby knitter as far as socks go. I've still got a lot to learn. I wanted to finish this sweater, and I wanted to work up one of these quilt kits from Oklahoma, which I cut that one out today. So yeah, so I'd like to pick that back up and work on it. I kind of got in the mood to do that, so maybe I'll pick it up and put a few rows on it now and get back in the mood to work on it. So yeah, that's kind of my future crafting. So if that's all you're here for in acquisitions, I've got a couple of yarny acquisitions that were gifts, and then I have a couple of non-yarny acquisitions. But before we get to that, actually, I want to talk a little bit about craftivism. So we're going to have a little segment on that first. Okay, guys, this is not a usual segment, and if it thunders during the middle of this, I apologize. We've got a little pop-up thunderstorm close by. I hope we get some more rain from it. I don't think it started raining yet, but it would be really great if it did. I want to talk a little bit about craftivism, or activism through craft. Okay. And I'm sorry, my dog Lucky is in here. He's really scared of storms, so I let him in, and Wally is in here too. They're both scared of my two ones that are scared of storms, and he's underneath my legs right now. But anyway, craftivism is not something new. Okay, craftivism has probably been around as long as crafting has been around. I mean, if you think about Betsy Ross making the Star Spangled Banner, I would call that craftivism. You know, so it didn't just start with the hats that everybody was making for the Women's March, okay? One of the reasons that I want to talk about this is there's two projects going on kind of right now that are, I think, would be fun to be involved in, and I want to try to do them. And then also, a friend of mine and I are talking about doing a workshop at this same conference that I'm going to next week, the following year's conference, doing a workshop on craftivism, because even though that's not what we do in our daytime lives, we both are crafters. So one of the things that I found out about recently, and some of you may already know about this, is the Welcome Blanket Project. And it is a project where you can crochet, you can knit, or you can quilt a blanket to donate to immigrant families. Okay, families that are coming in through the naturalization and immigration process. There is a template of a letter that welcomes them to the country, and then they are gifted your quilt or blanket. Okay, I think that's a really cool idea. Well, right now the Museum of Design in Atlanta, or MODA, is hosting the 2,000 Mile Project. And the 2,000 Mile Project gets its name from the idea of this wall. I will reserve my right to say things about it. But anyway, the wall that people are talking about building is approximately 2,000 miles long. So what they were wanting to do is have enough blankets and quilts and things donated to add up to a length of 2,000 miles. And that runs, I believe, through the end of August. There is information on the welcomeblanket.org website, but you can make the blankets and quilts, I think, anytime and donate those. And it's a very simple crochet pattern. I didn't look at the knit pattern because I'm just a much faster crocheter. Actually, I'm probably going to make a quilt because I'm even faster at doing that. So the other one is through the Loopy Stitcher has Connie's Rays of Hope, which is the cross-stitch mandala to help support people fighting breast cancer. You know, the whole charity make-along, I noticed one lady, I believe her name is Shirley, was doing the Cancer Kickin' Critters. So there's lots of different ways that you can express your activism through craft. And there's lots of examples of this, from the AIDS quilt to the hats from the Women's March. There were brain hats made for the Science March. There's lots of different ways that your activism or your personal belief system, you can support that through your crafting. And so I'm going to try to be more expressive in that way, I think. Yeah, put up or shut up, right? So I'm going to start putting up. I think I hear it raining. Yay. Okay, so that's sort of a diversion from my normal direction. So now we will move on to acquisitions. Okay, guys. Well, as I said, today is my birthday. I'm 49 years old today. I was born at 8 a.m. I was a cesarean section baby. And I miss my mom calling me at 8 o'clock every morning, but that's okay. I know that somewhere in the great beyond, she was pecking on my shoulder at 8 o'clock because I looked down at my watch at 8 o'clock and thought about her. My first acquisition is this gift that I got from my friend Connie. She got me this card, and she said she found this card a long time ago and put it up in her calendar to give it to me. But she had this shirt made for me. It's Pet Mom Life is Rough, R-U-F-F. She had that made for me, and I thought that was really sweet of her. I showed my great present a couple of weeks ago from Vanessa from A Historian Knits. She very sweetly sent me a gift. Well, I went to lunch with my friend Carol the other day when we took her blankets to the hospice house, and we met up for lunch, and she gave me a gift, and I've dropped part of it apparently somewhere because there was I guess it's laying over there. She gave me a unicorn pin, and then she also made this for me. She made me this little shawlette. Isn't that pretty? Okay, that's a sort of a virus shawl type design. Alright, and I love the bright colors in it. So this will definitely be in my fall wardrobe. It's very southwesterny colors, I guess you could say. So she made this for me. It's very, very soft. I really like it. So I was very grateful to receive 2 beautiful handmade gifts. And then a third that was made specially for me. So, yeah, so that's really beautiful. I'm really tickled with that. So, okay. Now, I got myself a little birthday gift. Well, I got myself 2 little birthday gifts. One of them yesterday, most of you yarny folks are probably very aware of the Countess Ablaze effort called the Tits Out Collective, and all of the dyers and all of the makers that were involved with that. And yesterday morning, I set my alarm and was up at 6 a.m. Of course, I'm up by that time anyway, but I was online at 6 a.m. to purchase a couple of skeins of yarn. I purchased one that supports a women's law center, and then the other one supported an animal rescue. So I will show those when they come in, but I did participate in that. But the other day, Miss Hayes asked me if I would ride with her to go look for some foliage. Her daughter's oldest child loves dinosaurs, and she was wanting to do a dinosaur-themed party, so she had found this neat display piece that had a dinosaur head looking through some vines, and she was wanting to find some vines. We have a store called A to Z, and it's actually it's like in a strip mall, and it's several different stores, but there's a crafting store to it, and they usually have tons of like silk flowers and decorations and deco mesh and ribbon and all this kind of mess. But it is very loud. They play Christian music in there, very loud, which I don't have a problem with Christian music. I have a problem with it being loud in there. And it is very cramped. Like if you 2 people cannot pass each other on one of the aisles. So you're playing chicken. It's okay. You're playing chicken with somebody if y'all are on the same aisle going opposite directions to see. You're going to get into a standoff to see who gives and has to back up the aisle because you can't pass each other in most of the aisles. Apparently it's under new ownership because their prices have gone up significantly, and so what used to be a place where you could go and get a good deal is not so much anymore. But I said all that to say we went to a flea market nearby there, and Miss Hayes found the most adorable teeny tiny little pink depression glass punch bowl set, which was just adorable. I was so tickled that she got it. But I found this, and this was in a booth where everything was marked down, and it's a jewelry box, and I thought it was beautiful. Okay, it looks like it might be laser cut, but it's an older, because I found some other examples of his work. It's marked on the bottom, so I think this is actually done with jigsaw or scroll saw actually. So this is a jewelry box, and it's really well made. See there, it's got the inside, okay, and that moves back and forth. So that was my birthday present to myself, along with the Countess Ablaze yarn, okay. So yeah, so got that. And then last but not least, I showed last week the knitting patterns, the Beatrix Potter knitting patterns. Well, what started me finding that book was a friend of mine from the barn. I'm not liking how close that lightning is. My phone's not plugged in, but I just worry about it for my animal's sake. But anyway, my friend Susan from the barn was telling me about a book that her mother-in-law had and gave to her about where you could make toys from the Beatrix Potter books. So I found this book. It was from a library apparently, but I found this book on eBay, and it is full of directions for sewing. Okay, now the pattern pieces you would have to trace off because you wouldn't want to cut your pages. Okay, but it goes through and it describes how to make all of the different characters from the Beatrix Potter stories. So it's an older book, but I think it's got some good information. It shows how to assemble them and everything. So I was pretty tickled about that. So those are my acquisitions for this week. And so now we're going to come back and talk a little bit about science. Well, I'm very grateful for the rain that we're getting. We've been desperately needing that. So this week on science, I actually had a special request. Antonia said, hey, can you talk a little bit about time travel and the scientific, ideas behind that? And so I said, I'll try, because that's not my area of expertise. Special relativity and quantum physics are not necessarily my areas of expertise, but I'll try to talk a little bit about them. So the basic idea behind time travel is somehow you can either go forward in time or back in time, and it turns out that going forward in time mathematically is a lot easier than going back in time, apparently. What it boils down to is the only way that this would be possible is either one, to go faster than the speed of light, which is, as far as we know, a physical impossibility, or two, to have the formation of something called a wormhole, which is basically a conduit essentially outside of our universe, or outside of our 4 dimensions, because we're 3 dimensions of space and 1 of time, that would link to places in the space-time continuum. Now, mathematically, time travel is predicted by several different models, although there are some issues. And when you start introducing quantum mechanics into the idea of time travel and special relativity, it sort of negates all possibilities of time travel. Okay, because they all end up violating what's called causality, where causality is what it sounds like, or it's cause and effect, okay? You can't have an event occur before the thing that caused it occurred. So causality apparently can't be violated, or at least mathematically it looks like that's where the problem is. So if you were to have events, switch in time, then cause and effect would break down, and apparently that's where all the physics models wag their finger and say, that can't happen. Now, there is some issues, or there is some evidence of time changing where you have, for example, someone going very fast. Like, for example, space shuttle or space station astronauts, I guess no more the space shuttle, but used to, they've come back, and because they were moving very rapidly around the Earth, they were essentially in free fall around the Earth, they were something like 1/1,000,000th of a second younger than everybody on Earth, or if they had stayed on Earth, then they were 1/1,000,000th of a second younger, because according to special relativity, the faster you go, then your clock slows down. So you're aging slower than the people here on the Earth. The problem with using that for time travel is to be able to go back to where you came from, you'd have to be able to go faster than light, and so far as we know, that's not possible. So far, every example that we've seen, you know, a few years ago, there was an experiment out of Tennessee that said they had discovered essentially tachyons, which are a particle that you've heard about in science fiction, or particles that travel faster than light. They said they had discovered them, but upon closer inspection, there was just an error in their experiment. So far, every experiment that claims to have found something that is capable of, you know, superluminal speed, or being the idea that it can time travel, has been proven incorrect. So unfortunately, right now, as far as our understanding goes, it's not possible, and that's probably okay, because, you know, you get into the whole idea of, well, if you travel back in time, you know, if you ever watched the original series Star Trek, there was one of the episodes called City on the Edge of Forever, where Dr. McCoy somehow gets exposed to some kind of injection that makes him go crazy, and he runs through this thing called the Guardian, I believe it is, and he goes back in time, and through a series of events, he prevents this person from being killed, and then it ends up that Hitler is not defeated in World War II, and the Nazis take over the entire world. And, you know, so this idea is that he went back and changed the course of history, and it caused the Enterprise to disappear. And I mean, all this different stuff happened. So there's something called the grandfather paradox, where if you go back in time, what if you accidentally kill your own grandfather and then you're never born? So that violates causality, because that cause and effect problem crops up on that. But anyway, so as far as my somewhat limited understanding of the subject goes, it's a nice idea for science fiction, but as far as our understanding in terms of current technology and science go, it's not possible. So, Antonia, I hope that is what you were looking for. If it's not, I apologize. I tried. But anyway, another thing that I wanted to share, I saw a really cool video about the history of the button. Isaac Mizrahi did this really cool video, and apparently buttons were decorative up until about the 13th century, and then they were used as closures on clothing, which revolutionized the way clothing fit. But they actually haven't changed a whole lot in their functionality and their form since then. So it's a really cute video. It's really well done. So I'm going to include a link to that as well. And also, we're getting ready to enter the dog days of summer, okay? And then you may wonder what the dog days are. The dog days of summer are when the star Sirius starts becoming visible in the early morning sky just prior to sunrise. It's called the heliacal rise, or heliacal rise, and it's when it just precedes the sunrise on the eastern horizon. And the star Sirius is quite bright in the sky, and it had significant importance to the ancient Egyptians. And in fact, in the Great Pyramid, there are tunnels or slots cut through the Great Pyramid, and one of the stars that lines up in those slots at a certain time of the year, I want to say it's one of the equinoxes, but I can't remember, is Sirius, because it's very bright and it was a very important star. It's also called the dog days by the Greeks and Romans, because it was the time of year where there was oppressive heat, we got that, drought conditions, which we've got, sudden thunderstorms, which we have, and dogs are very lethargic. Okay. Now, Willie is far from lethargic, but it's just basically too hot to move. And so in the northern hemisphere, the dog days are sort of the heat of summer. So we are just entering the dog days of summer, and they can start anywhere from early July to mid-August, and they run for, till mid-September. So, yeah, I am still working on my online class. I've got one more week of that to go. I've got to do some grading. I'm trying not to grade on my birthday, but I may have to do a little bit tonight. I'm going to try to put it off till tomorrow. And I also finished the Astronomy of Astrology class for the group up north of where I live. It was a 4-week class, and we finished up with talking about constellations, and then looking at the Farmer's Almanac and talking about what the different moon signs meant. I am going to be doing a workshop next week at this conference I'm going to about the science behind weather lore. So something like ring around the moon, rain or snow by noon, why does that actually work? So one day I will talk about that on here, because there is a scientific reason why that is actually a valid saying. But if you think about it, a lot of those weather lore sayings come from observation. They come from many times of observation, and that's really what science is. They didn't know the why that it happened, but they knew that it happened, and they put 2 and 2 together. So, yeah, so that's pretty much my science moment for today. Hopefully you're still awake after all of that. And we're going to come back and talk a little bit about the farm. Okay, so we've got some good rain happening outside right now. I'm very grateful for that because we were extremely dry. We were actually starting to get into some high fire risk, and if you remember several episodes ago, I talked about the fire in 2012, and I start getting a little anxious when the ground starts getting crunchy. But what's going on this week is I put the chicks out in their big pen finally. I secured it, and I have some predator lights. They're called night guard lights, and they are little solar powered boxes that have a red and an infrared LED on them, and they power up during the day, and then they flash like every 15 seconds at night, and you can hang them at different heights, and they are supposed to be helpful in warding off predators, which is good because I have had some predation in my birds before. I did lose one chick, and I guess it was to a predator. I had split them up into 2 different pens before I moved them to the big pen, and I went out, and one was just gone. There was no feathers. There was no evidence of the pen being damaged. It was just gone. So I don't know exactly what happened there, but it spurred me on to go ahead and get them moved into their final, their permanent location, and I haven't had any problems, knock on wood, since then. I did go pick up a new bunny rabbit. I got a French lop. He needed a home, and the lady asked me if I would take him, and I said yes. So I have a male French lop now. His name is Marbles, and I posted some pictures of him on my Instagram account. And I do have a possum eating with my cats, which you saw pictures of. He's been coming in. He was actually up on the porch the other day when I opened the door, and he looked at me, and I looked at him, and he's getting to where now he doesn't always run away from me. And I know that people say, well, possums carry EPM, which is equine proezoidal myelitis, which, yes, they do. This is not one that I'm worried about because he doesn't get anywhere around my horses. He lives by my house and eats with my cats. It's the ones out in the pasture that I worry about. Can't kill all of those, and, there's just, you have to just take the rough with the smooth and do the best that you can and hope for the best. Okay, so I did find a recycling center that takes glass, which made me very excited. I have been hauling my recycling around for about a week because there is a recycling facility over by where I ride, but somehow I never managed to stop. So this morning, to celebrate my birthday, I went and got the oil changed in my car. I got up early and went to the co-op and got my oil changed. And I asked the lady who knows me well in there, I said, is there a recycling facility? She said, oh yeah, they take this and this, and they take glass. And I'm like, oh, they take glass? Because most places will not take glass. So I was really excited to find that. I do have a trunk load of donations to go to Marva, which I'm going to take tomorrow. I'm going to go drop off my donation of my hospice quilts in the morning, or tomorrow afternoon rather, and then I'm going to take the stuff to Marva. Miss Betsy's got to go get her car fixed, or her windshield fixed. She had a rock hit her windshield the other day, so she had made an appointment for that, and I told her that I would come pick her up. She's very hard to, she's like me, she doesn't like people to have to be put out to help her, and I said, no, I'm going to be in town anyway, so I'm going to go pick her up, and we're going to go have some lunch. So, yeah, one article that I wanted to kind of share was at the end of the farm segment is there was an article on CBS News about the increasing rate of suicide in farmers, And maybe not a lot of people think about this. I kind of got bothered the other day because someone that I know, who I think a lot of, had posted that he'd been 1 year as a pescatarian vegetarian, and his reasons were number one, factory farming, number two, if I can't kill it, I'm not going to eat it, and then number three, better health. And I get that, but I wish that people would consider other alternatives like buying locally, because the family farm is a dying thing. I don't know, there's been a lot of articles about the price of milk being so low and a lot of family dairies going under, and now you're just moving more and more toward these big factory dairies where the animals maybe are not as well treated. Factory farms make me sick. I mean, I am not advocating for them in the least. They make me sick. But there are options, okay? And I'm pretty sure he's not killing the fish he's eating either. So, you know, and I thought, no, I'm not going to pick a fight with him. There's no point in it. But I encourage you, if you're wanting to change your eating lifestyle, consider trying to buy local. I mean, most of us, even if you live in a more urban area, there is access to things like the locally grown movement, where the locally grown people have a website where you can make your purchases, and there's a once a week pickup, or there's farmers markets or things like that. Because more of the money will go in that farmer's pocket than if you buy it at a big box store. And the animals are usually better treated, or almost always better treated. The food is going to be healthier because it's fresher and it's picked at the peak of ripeness instead of when it's still green to be shipped to you. And you're helping out a family business. You know, farmers face, you know, the weather. The weather is a fickle mistress. You know, we have countries where we do a lot of exporting. You know, a lot of big farms export, and if there's tariffs or things like that, there's no guaranteed income, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Farming income is unpredictable at best. So a lot of times there's money worries, or people have to work a second job in town to either have sufficient income, or they have to have health care or whatever, and that's just, you know, it wears on people. And then you add in the fact that it's a family-run operation usually, and you're trying to not let your family down, and you've got this long heritage, and you don't want to be the one who loses the family farm. It can be a lot. So, yeah. So I wanted to put the link to that article there and just try to encourage you to buy locally whenever possible. I know it's not always in people's price points to be able to do that, and you may just not have access to it. But whenever you have the opportunity, you know, try to do that. And then also, you know, be nice to farmers. They try really hard. Yeah. Last thing I'll say is, I don't know if you saw, but my vet came. Dr. Angel came, so I put a little shorty video up about that, because we did shots and drew blood for everybody, so that was kind of fun. It was good to get to visit with her, because she is a good friend, and so I'm always glad to see her. But anyway, so that kind of ends our farm segment for today, and we'll come back and wrap up with a few final thoughts. I am very, very grateful for this wonderful rain that we're getting here on my birthday. That's a really great birthday present, and one that was much, much needed. I want to thank everybody that has reached out on social media today to wish me a happy birthday, or has called or texted or gotten me wonderful, beautiful gifts or sent cards. It really means a lot. I mean, I live a pretty isolated existence a lot of times. You know, I might go in the summertime 2 or 3 days and not see other people. So, I really appreciate that. I appreciate having this family of choice that reaches out to me, and that makes me feel really good. So I'm thankful for everybody that does that. I'm thankful for the kind words that people have left in comments on the podcast. It means a lot to me, from the bottom of my heart, for y'all to do that. I wanted to talk a little bit today about one program that I had been watching. It's a program that I believe originated in the UK, called Who Do You Think You Are? And it's a genealogy program, and they take famous individuals and they trace their family lineage back, and sometimes they go way, way back, and sometimes it's more just they focus on one family member in particular. But it's very, very interesting. And there were two that really kind of got next to me. I was watching them yesterday. The one with Jane Seymour and then Stephen Fry. Both of them have Jewish family members who were alive during the Holocaust. And to look at the footage and to listen to the stories and to see these people looking for their family members who they knew were probably murdered in a concentration camp or at a death camp, but to actually see the listing of their name as one that was killed, and them just to be a number, to just be a statistic. And to watch some of the footage, there was a particular piece of footage where there was a very elderly woman standing there, and this SS officer had a horse crop, like the leather end, the big end of the horse crop, and he was like backing, jerking her head around with it, and that just made me sick that one human being could do that to another, could undervalue a life that much. And so that was an interesting program. It made me think. I guess that's why I really am motivated now to be involved in these craftivism projects. The other thing that I wanted to do was to read you a poem about, I talked a little bit about being land-tied, and this is a poem by Yeats, one of my favorite poets, and it's actually on the back cover of this book that I have. And it's kind of the, being kind to one another and also being kind to this planet. That seems to be the running theme in these final thoughts things. I'm sorry if that bores you, but it's important to me, so I'm going to keep doing it. But anyway, so this poem is the Lake Isle of Innisfree. It says, I will arise and go now and go to Innisfree, and a small cabin build there of clay and wattles made. 9 bean rows will I have there, and a hive for the honey bee, and live alone in the bee-loud glade. And I shall have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow, dropping from the veils of the morning to where the cricket sings. There's midnights all a glimmer, and noon a purple glow, and an evening full of the linnet's wing. I will arise and go now, for always night and day I hear lake water lapping with the low sounds by the shore. While I stand on the roadway or on the pavement's gray, I hear it in the deep heart's core. I love that poem because even when I lived in town, when I lived in Norman, Oklahoma for 13 years, I never forgot this place. I heard it in the deep heart's core. I think we probably all have a place that strikes that chord in us. And so I hope that even if you can't go there in body, you can go there in spirit, and you can find some peace in the deep heart's core. And I hope you're meeting your crafting goals. And I hope that you're doing good. And until I see y'all again, come on, Willie. Be good to each other. Take care of each other. He don't want to wear his hat. And peace out, y'all. Bye.